George Russell took a dominant victory in Singapore, but all the headlines were about McLaren and not that they won the Constructors' Championship. It looks like the gloves are finally off between Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. What is really going on at McLaren? Is the harmony over? Has the facade finally slipped? We'll discuss that and more as we take a look back at the Singapore Grand Prix. This is Inside the Piranha Club. I'm Rebecca Clancy.
And I'm Ben Hunt, and we need to kick off with this, don't we, really?
We do.
Norris.
I want
Norris
to talk
versus...
about George, because it was a good victory, but we'll come to him.
Yes, absolutely. Very much the second story of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think that, for anyone that hasn't watched it, there was obviously Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri coming close on the first lap, first couple of turns, and did make contact. Lando was quite aggressive, not overly aggressive, but holding his own, and they banged wheels, and he benefited. So interesting. And then later in the race, there was a slow pit stop for both drivers at one point, but Oscar Piastri came off worth with a slow stop, and McLaren didn't swap him around, which they had done in previous races. So he was a little bit unhappy, shall we say.
Well, if you haven't watched the race, firstly, don't bother. Just catch the first lap on YouTube. The rest of it was pretty rubbish, apart from the radio messages, which I'm sure you can probably also find collated somewhere. Lando Norris actually nearly ran into the back of Max Verstappen. So started fifth, Verstappen was second, and it's obviously a very tight concertina going in through the first few turns. Actually broke, so he didn't make too much contact with Verstappen, damaged his end plate with contact with that Red Bull, which he says then bounced him into Piastri. It was the radio messages which made it interesting, wasn't it? Because Piastri came on straight away and said, basically, I haven't got the radio message in front of me, but said, are we okay with Lando pushing me into the wall?
Yeah, he was very upset, and then, expected, I think, to be told that, or for the order to be given that Norris would pull over and allow him to go through, as is the situation that McLaren have made for themselves by swapping the drivers around, most notably in Hungary, what was it, last year, and then obviously in Monza this year. They've made a rod for their own back by managing the outcome of the race, and unfortunately that they have to live by that, but they didn't on this occasion. They kept with the order, which meant that obviously Norris finished ahead of Piastri, scoring some valuable points in the championship that keeps the Drivers' Championship alive, but very much, a very different story at the end of the race, where Piastri is quite uncomfortable and angry at the team, despite having won the Constructors' Championship.
I would argue that this is actually what we've needed to see from Lando Norris all along. It was an aggressive move, I would say, but absolutely within the limits of racing, particularly lap one. The FIA noted it and then decided there was no need for a further investigation. McLaren themselves said they were looking into it and said, we're not going to take any further action. It makes me wonder, this version of Lando Norris, 21 points behind now in the championship, 6 races to go. Do you think something happened over the weekend, or maybe in the run-up to the weekend, that's just starting to niggle at Lando, that's making him a bit more aggressive, that's making him go for the gap? Like he said after the race, if you're not going to go for a massive gap, which, to be fair, it did look like a big gap, then, you can't complain to me about that. So, I don't know, it does feel like there's a lot more going on behind the scenes. And actually, Piastri didn't play the PR game in the car when the adrenaline is racing, and I think we really get to see their true emotions and what they're really thinking. Came out of the car, it was all very PR, company line, as they're very good at, and that's one of the reasons they get paid a lot of money as well. But it feels like the gloves are off.
Yeah, I think that the mentality changed around Austria. I called it, if you remember at the time, when Dunn was in the car and then Norris came out and had a really good session, and it was all about a change of attitude and mentality and sort of being a little bit more breezy, a bit more confident, but also sort of taking matters into his own hands a little bit more. And obviously since then he's been, there's been mistakes, but he's also been on the receiving end of some favourable decisions, which has obviously
very favourable.
Kept him in contention. But this time, I think it was not so much Norris's actions, but more so the reaction of Piastri. It was a side that we've not seen, which was him losing his rag. It comes obviously after the disappointment of Azerbaijan, and you say that it's good that we're seeing this of Norris, but I'd also say that this is good for us neutrals to be watching it with Piastri as well, because he is angry. He has the right to be angry. He's still leading the championship, but of course, managed by Mark Webber, that famous, not bad for a number two driver. He knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of bad decisions or what he perceives to be bad decisions. And I think that there is a little bit of frustration there. Piastri came in after the race, and Zak Brown came on the radio to congratulate him on helping the team win the constructors championship, and he disconnects the radio midway through Brown's message, which is one incident. And then obviously by the time when the team are celebrating on the podium, he's already in Parc Fermé. Sorry, he's not in Parc Fermé, he's in the TV pen doing interviews. So very much not part of those initial celebrations. And while he was later on, I think the initial frustration was still bubbling away. For me, what's really interesting is that McLaren have always had this papaya rules and we will do what's best for the team. Now, the difference being now is that in the remaining 6 races this year, it doesn't have to be in the team's interest because they've secured that Constructors' Championship. So the only interest that matters now is the drivers and the points that they're scoring and the trophies they're winning. And this is an entirely different situation to manage for Andrea Stella and Zak Brown to be in, and they haven't been in this territory before. They've always done everything with the benefit of helping the team. Right up until the final race of last year, it was all about driving the team forward in order to win the Constructors' Championship, but that is now all done and dusted. That can't be taken away from them. It's down to the Drivers' Championship, and win at all costs. And I think that we will see a different.
What does that mean, though?
Well, I think we will see a different Piastri in the next race, and also a different Norris as well. And I think that is an exciting prospect, and one that the sport needs, because we want to see them sort of fighting, don't we?
Well, I think it's fair to say they are fighting. And they were on the... McLaren have said all along that they didn't want to plan anything for the celebrations. They only needed 13 points this weekend. It was pretty much wrapped up before they got there, given the performance of the car. But they hadn't planned anything, and that podium celebration was impromptu. Do you think anyone noticed that Piastri was missing? I don't feel like it was deliberate, but I could understand why Piastri might be a bit pissed off about it.
Yeah, for sure. I would imagine that there's people within the team that knew that he was missing.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah.
It's certainly on his side of the garage.
Like his PR person who was with him in the TV pen.
Yes, I think it's an interesting dynamic now that they've got to manage, and as I said before, it's new territory for them, and how they manage it is very important, not only for the end of this year but for 2026 as well, and maintaining that harmony. Because if you've got two drivers that are able to get on, great, but if this blows the lid off and it is now an irreparable relationship, then you've got another problem on your hands.
But you can't get on with your teammate when you're fighting for a world championship, can you? I mean, if you're getting on, then you're not really world championship material. This is potentially their only shot with the big regs coming in next year. So, I mean, it's kind of ended up how we said all along that it was going to end up. And it was all well and good. Andrea Stella, the team principal, and Zak Brown saying, the McLaren CEO saying that they were, it's absolutely fine. We're going to keep it harmonious. We have papaya rules, which basically just means don't crash into each other. But actually, this was absolutely inevitable.
Yes, it is. And I think that Zak Brown is a racer at heart and knew that this was coming. He's always said that there'll be a time when they will start banging wheels when we're fighting for wins, and it will be up to him to manage it. But of course, the way that you manage it is by saying team first, remember the team's first, and that's one way of doing it, and no one's bigger than the team, etc., etc. That's fine. That's worked up until this point, but like I said before, that's all now out the window. It doesn't matter now. The team have won the constructors, so the mentality shifts from, rather than the team perspective, it's the drivers out for themselves. And yes, it might have always been the case for the drivers, but now the team can't remind them and use that line of doing the best for the team, because it doesn't mean anything. It's now actually up to the drivers to fight for that title, the Drivers' Championship, which is obviously what matters most to them anyway.
And they may not have it their own way because Max Verstappen has beaten both McLarens for the last 3 races. Okay, he's 61 points behind Piastri, 6 races to go. That's an average of 10 points, give or take, that he has to take out for the next few rounds. It's a tough ask, but the way that McLaren are now infighting between those two drivers, the way that Verstappen is just kind of looking around him being like, all right, lads, you do you, and I'm just going to steamroll through the middle and take my 5th championship. Thank you very much. You just wouldn't put it past him, and particularly because Verstappen is just so good. And also, those last 3 times that he's beaten them, 3 completely different circuits, which means that car isn't bad on high downforce circuits like we thought with Singapore, where he's normally not gone very well. He was second. Russell had the race of his life, possibly the weekend of his life. And otherwise, Verstappen would have been taking 10 points out of Piastri. So actually, I can't rule him out.
No, he was quite cautious about saying that at the weekend. I think that he was, after the race, it was kind of like, I didn't win. Obviously, George won, which we're still not come to yet, but George won, and I think that, the points are probably going to be too much, but like you say, you can't rule him out just yet, especially if McLaren start taking each other out. I mean, both of those failed to finish in Kota, and Max goes on to win the US Grand Prix, and it's, game on, isn't it?
Just quickly on Max Verstappen's teammate Yuki Tsunoda, obviously
really,
there was
really
a lot of
disappointing
chat after Azerbaijan, and then he came to Singapore, and he said it was the worst race and the best race of his life. By worst, he means the start obviously was terrible, and I'm not really sure what he means by best, but he never really came back.
No, I don't know what he means by the best. It was a shocking performance all weekend. Especially at a time where Isaac Hadjar's talking so openly and confidently about being Max's teammate next season. I mean, this is a rookie, and he's already, saying things like that is quite staggering. And yeah, fair play to the guy, because he's come in and really done well. So, I think that Tsunoda should be worried, or maybe he's already at peace with the decision that maybe he won't be in that Red Bull seat next year. I don't know, but it was a really interesting phrase to use at the end. For me, he just hasn't done enough this year to warrant staying in that seat.
No, sadly not. He finished 12th, and while his teammate is vying for the World Championship, he's currently 17th in the Drivers' Championship.
Yeah, that's really, shocking, isn't it?
It's unacceptable, isn't it? And actually, when you look at the Constructors' Championship, on current form, you'd say Mercedes have probably got that second place wrapped up. Okay, there's 20-odd points between them and Ferrari in third. Red Bull are only 10 points behind Ferrari in fourth. And Ferrari, for me, were the big disappointment for this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing, just going back to Tsunoda and the team's championship, it just underlines how important it is to have those 2 cars in the fight. I mean, McLaren wrapping it up with 6 to go is testament not only to the team but the 2 drivers they've got there delivering consistently each weekend. But in Red Bull, you've only got 1 car finishing consistently higher in the points, and Max has won the championship on his own the last couple of times, really. Such as the points margin that he amassed. But you do need 2 cars fighting, and they just haven't got that at the moment. And yes, Ferrari, very disappointing weekend for them, wasn't it?
Well, let me tell you what Charles Leclerc said after the race. He said the drivers were just passengers within the car. He said, I wish I could say that I'm more positive for the rest of the season, but I don't think there's anything in the car at the moment that proves to me that we are going to do a step forwards. That is brutal. Lewis Hamilton got a post-race penalty. He finished 7th, dropped down to 8th after that penalty because his brakes didn't seem to work and he couldn't stay within the track limits. And so, as is the FIA's right, they gave him a penalty. Just not good enough from Ferrari. What is going on there? How are they 4th fastest now?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's happened. It's not good enough, is it? I think that there's been lots of problems with Lewis adjusting to that Ferrari car, and braking has always been an issue. It's been his strength in other teams. He was used to the carbon industry brakes previously. I think that they used Brembo at Ferrari, and okay, that takes a little bit of getting used to, but I don't know. It's just so underwhelming, isn't it? Each weekend, they come in and they finish 6th, 7th, and try and put a brave face on things, but you just can't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And now you've got the drivers turning around and saying, "Yeah, it's not good." I may have to revise my prediction that Hamilton will win a race before the end of the year.
Well, you said Brazil, so they've still got a bit of time to turn it around.
Still got a bit of time, but I just can't see
Got
the
2 races
development.
before. We'll go to Austin and Mexico before then.
I just can't see the development coming in order to tie all this car up together and for them to make real progress. I think that most teams would be now focusing on 26, rightly so. And I think that they've just got this car until the end of the year.
What I am thinking, though, is after Baku, there was a lot of talk about the execution by the team, as in it's the drivers. Now we've got the drivers coming out and saying they're just passengers and blaming the car. So actually, is there a bigger problem within Ferrari at the moment?
Yeah, I think sometimes we saw this at Mercedes, didn't we, with the porpoising and pushing in a particular area, trying to get a result and a positive uptick, and it never came. And then they realised they were going in the wrong direction with their philosophy. Whether it's a case of Ferrari have done that and just keep going down wrong avenues, looking for a solution, I don't know. I think that ultimately they're too far into this season now, like I said, and you just can't make any significant improvements between now and the end of the year. It's not cost effective to do so. I think that you just suck it up. Vasseurs got his contract in for next year. It's all now on 26 and they need to start strongly. Otherwise, the knife's going to be out for him.
Yeah. It's not been a good season for Ferrari, and obviously, as I said, those big reg changes for 26, a lot of teams already looking that direction. And also, I have to correct myself because Verstappen is 63 points behind Piastri, not 61. So if he loses out in the championship by 2 points, it's my fault. Another curse from me. Shall we quickly talk about Fernando Alonso?
Well,
we should. Said it was,
yeah.
Some people said it was a spectacular drive. I'm not buying it.
Well, I think the person that said it is a big fan, isn't he? He's a big fan.
Let's not throw people under the bus. But
Absolutely
I actually want to
not.
talk about his swearing, his attitude, his... that Aston Martin is a bit of a mess, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a mess all season, pretty much like the Ferrari scenario. I think that there's definitely something going on at Aston Martin now. Where there's a bit of a problem. Adrian Newey, yes, he's working on 2026 car, but I think that ultimately he's being pulled into this quick. We need something to help us because this year's just not gone to plan. Again, we know Stroll isn't the strongest of drivers, and again, it was another underwhelming performance from him. I think Alonso is now...
he's openly complaining about the car.
Yeah, and I think Alonso's... Yes, he is. And I think Alonso, despite his talent, is also struggling. Yeah, the car's not right. It's not make the progress that they had hoped. And I think the other element as well is, of course, the way that team is managed and run by Lawrence Stroll. It makes it very difficult. Adrian Newey has always had freedom to design and sort of go about his business without ever being hauled in front of the main boss to explain his workings, if you like, whereas that may be a slightly different scenario and proposition at Aston Martin, where we know that Lawrence is definitely on it and wants results and is paying for results, and she's just not getting them at the moment. So I think it's a really, really interesting dynamic. Andy Cow mentioning Horner's name, which was interesting. Not sure where that's all come from.
We'll talk about Horner in a second.
Yeah, okay, but maybe
you're right. It's not very harmonious.
It's not harmonious, and I just think that there's a lot of ingredients there, and it's just not all coming together in the right manner. And I think that they should be concerned for next year. Obviously, new engine partner as well. Lots of unknowns really at Aston Martin, and sort of been upstaged by Williams that are operating in a much smarter capacity, despite what happened at the weekend with them.
Shall we have some good news?
We need to talk about George, don't we?
We need to talk about George.
Yeah.
The Russell Hustle in Singapore, as it was. Absolutely brilliant all weekend. He set the time provisional pole in qualifying on Saturday. He was the only person to beat his own time. He was absolutely flying. It was excellent from him on Sunday. He said that he was really nervous because he started on the slightly slower medium tyre. Max Verstappen in second started on the softer, faster tyre, theoretically. He said when he saw that Max was on that tyre, he got really nervous. But actually, amazing defensive job. We know you can't really race in Singapore. It's impossible to overtake. So actually, once he held on at the first corner, it was his right. But then 2 years ago, he was due a podium spot and he crashed to the wall at turn 10, which he referenced constantly after the race and was making jokes about it. He's laid those demons to rest, as he did in Canada, where he took his other victory this year. He's also had 8 podiums, making this his most successful season. It's just a really good story for Russell, isn't it?
Yeah, he stepped up. He's Britain's number one F1 driver at the moment, in my opinion. I think in terms of... Yeah, I do. In terms of consistency and also performance in a car that shouldn't really be there. He's delivering. I think that if Russell was in that McLaren, he would be leading the championship by now. I think that he has got that ruthlessness that we talk about with Norris, and we've mentioned on this podcast before that, whenever those two have gone head to head, it's always been Russell that comes out on top. And I don't think he gets the credit perhaps that he deserves. He's still a young man. What is he, 27, I think? Director of the GPDA, speaks his mind, seems to be now at peace with his own personality. I think he tried a little bit too hard to try and engineer a profile on social media to try and win more fans, and maybe has given up on that and just being himself. Seems very happy with his partner, living in Monaco. He just seems at peace, and I think that he's relaxed. He keeps talking about this contract which isn't signed, and I don't know why Mercedes haven't signed him up for a really long-term deal, because for me he is the real deal. And I think that Toto Wolff needs someone to build a team around, and he was hoping it was going to be Max Verstappen. But I would argue, George Russell isn't a bad second choice, and he should be really looking to him, to build that team and move forward. He's done a great job with Kimi Antonelli, has been friendly, offered him advice, and I think that Antonelli now, I know he had a really bad European season, I think that hopefully in this tail end of the year in the flyaways, you'll see a bit of a stronger performance from him. And I think for me, George is just all round, a really good all rounder. And for me, it's a no-brainer to offer him a new long-term deal, which I assume they will do, but I just don't know why it's taken them so long to get around to doing it.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with you. I think people underestimate Russell because he's such a nice guy, and I don't mean this with any offence. There's not loads to him. He's not really edgy. He doesn't have this, he just kind of is what you see on TV. He's just a nice bloke. He's straight up and down. He loves racing. He loves his family. He's not out on the sims all the time. He has a life away from the track as well. Yes, that was a slightly cringy moment in his career where he hired a social media team, and not for me or him actually, as it turned out. But I think he's excellent, and he beat Norris in F2 and F3, back-to-back champion. He is extremely good. I think with Mercedes, from what I understand, it's the niggly details. So it's the extracurricular commitments. I think Mercedes would be absolutely bonkers to not lock him down. I totally agree with you. There's a lot of chatter in the paddock at the moment about how this Mercedes engine is the one for next year. It's going to be the strongest. How people know this is always beyond me, but a lot of chatter about it.
Yeah.
Perhaps because Ferrari aren't performing, Honda, so you never quite know what version you're going to get sometimes. Ford, brand new. Bit of a... Well, no one knows, let's be honest. But with George, I think they need to lock him down. They need to accept that someone is going to come knocking. We don't know the pecking order for next year yet. Why don't you lock him down, sign him up for 5 years, like the Ferrari team have done, like Red Bull did with Max Verstappen. And then if someone wants him, at least if you lose him, you're getting a ton of money anyway. So it doesn't actually, for me, make any sense. Max Verstappen, I think, is most likely going to run out his Red Bull contract and then retire, because I don't know how much he even loves this anymore. Yes, he wants the World Championships. I think there's absolutely no doubt he's enjoying what's happening at McLaren at the moment. And you can see it when he's meddling in the press conferences and the little words that he has with them and the kind of jokes that he has with them. He is enjoying it. But I think he sees a life outside of F1 already. I think we're seeing it when he's racing at the Nordschleife and winning. And also credit to him for going and doing it properly, qualifying, learning how to do it, making sure that he's safe, everyone else is safe. And I think there is another life for him. So lock down George Russell, build your team around George Russell. Antonelli has been underwhelming, Toto Wolff's words. Yes, he was better in Singapore. And actually, Toto Wolff came out and said, it's his best weekend, most rounded weekend ever. It's like, okay, you've already said it now, mate.
Yeah, too late
you've dented the confidence already, yeah. But for me, George is the real deal. And I think if he can get himself into a championship winning car consistently, I think there's absolutely no reason why he can't be a world champion sooner rather than later.
Shall we do a perfect segue into Christian Horner? Because,
Shall we? Let's. Lots of chatter.
Because if you remember what Christian used to say about George Russell was that,
I do.
What's going on with George? Like maybe I'll sign George. Yeah, maybe I'm interested in George. And I used to think, yeah, okay, maybe there's something in that. And perhaps there is. I mean, you've got to say that...
Horner was always a fan of George.
But I wonder whether, if indeed he was still at Red Bull, whether he'd be making a play for Russell in this scenario, knowing that he hasn't got a contract. Because, yes, okay, him and Max together is a bit like, oil and water. But, arguably the two best drivers on the grid in the same team. It might work.
What, do you rate George over Oscar Piastri?
Yes, I think I do. I've been impressed with Piastri this year. It's only his second season still in Formula One. I think that Russell's now, 7 years in? Something like that? Seven seasons?
About that.
And as I said before, I think if he was driving that McLaren, he'd be leading the championship.
Yeah, so let's talk about Horner, because there has been a lot of chatter and a couple of developments, or sort of rumour developments, in Singapore. Andy Cowell, actually, Ao Komatsu, the team principal at Haas, came out and said, yes, we've had a phone call from Christian Horner. No, we don't have any interest in him. And then obviously all the team principals were asked about it. And Andy Cowell came out and said in the team principal press conference on Friday that he had spoken to Lawrence Stroll, owner of Aston Martin, and indeed there had been contact. But as far as he was aware, that was going no further and nothing was going to be happening with Aston Martin. Steve Nielsen, who's the managing director at Alpine, where Horner has been very strongly linked because he is very good friends with Flavio Briatore, the boss there, said, from what I've heard, it's not happening, but this is F1. So that was interesting. And then The Race broke a story over the weekend to say that Horner is actually investigating setting up his own team. It wouldn't be before 2028. He'd obviously need some hefty investment, big backers. Not unrealistic. Mario Andretti effectively set up what we now are calling Cadillac. It is possible. F1 are interested in more teams. What's your feeling?
Yeah, he could definitely do that. I think that F1 rules allow for 12 teams, and I think that there's definitely unfinished business. And I think that whichever project he picks next has to be the right project. And looking at what's available at the moment, I wouldn't say that there are many too appetising choices for him. I think that Aston Martin would be very difficult for him to come in.
Impossible, surely, with Adrian Newey there.
Well, no, I think that they've sort of gone under a lot of water under the bridge already with that, and they went to the Oasis concert together.
Adrian Newey was pretty open about why he left.
No, I think that I firmly believe that that those two could still work together in some capacity. I just think that they need a break. They've had the break, and by the time that Horner does come back in, it'll probably be not until middle of next year, I'd imagine. Given the severance from Red Bull.
So it's the start of the season. He's allowed back in.
So we'll see. But I could see him potentially working with Adrian. I think the issue there is Lawrence, and how would Lawrence Stroll take to Horner being there and Horner saying, how am I going to work here if I've got to fire your son?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Horner would not tolerate Lance Stroll.
That wouldn't work.
No.
So that's ruled out. I think buying into Haas is probably not really appealing. I don't think at this moment in time. Alpine, is an option with Briatore, but there's a lot of rebuilding there. Has he got the appetite to do that whole rebuilding process, or does he really want to go one better and start his own team? Someone like him is very well connected and can obviously rustle up finance and build the right thing. And no doubt that there are people still in touch with him, and obviously he carries so much influence at Red Bull that it would be fairly easy to attract top talent and start a project. And I think that you only need to see the momentum that the Cadillac project's got. And okay, they've got a really tough time in trying to get up to speed for the new season, but there's lots of experienced people that have got on board with that project in the belief and the hope that it is going to be, one for the future. So I do think that, there's definitely legs in that story. The fact that he might wish to start his own team, but it's got to be the right thing. It's got to be the right choice.
I wouldn't write off Alpine, only in the sense that he basically did that with Red Bull. They were a struggling team. He built them up. He brought in the right personnel, and he got them to where they are now, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Whether or not he has the energy to do it again, although I would argue setting up a new team probably is more energy consuming. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what he does next. And just a quick word on Red Bull, because you mentioned Dunn earlier with Austria and doing the FP1 for Lando Norris. McLaren have now released Alex Dunn as one of their drivers. This is not a slight on Dunn's performance, by the way. This is because we believe he is connected with Red Bull. Actually, Helmut Marko, the advisor there at Red Bull, who looks after all the junior programs, he's speaking very favourably about Alex Dunn, says there are talks going on. So that is piling on the pressure, because we now have 6 drivers vying for 4 seats, with Arvid Lindblad also part of that junior program in F2, although not doing very well in F2, I would argue. And then we also have Lawson, Hadjar in the Racing Bulls, and then Snowder. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
So it's getting spicy. So if Horner does set up his own team, there are loads of extra drivers for him.
There's always been extra drivers. It's just the ones that are they any good? And I think that Dunn is good, and it is quite a surprise to see McLaren to let him go, especially with the precarious situation with Norris and Piastri that we've mentioned before.
Well, the Piastri rumours are already starting, aren't they, that he's looking at elsewhere, he's not happy within the team. I don't fully buy into it now, but also, as we well know, having been in the paddock a long time, everybody's talking to everybody.
Yeah, but also it is quite hard to stomach, I would imagine, after what happened in Monza when he was asked to swap places, and and then not on the receiving end of that decision that's just happened. And obviously McLaren is Norris's team, and he has that historic link with Zach Brown. You're always going to be an outsider in that team. And I think that, if he is going to be, like a number one, and if some team can promise him and assure him that he would be that number one in the same way that Red Bull treat Verstappen, then I think that Piastri would move and go somewhere else. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, makes sense to me too. So rumours tend to not come from nowhere in this sport. It's usually from the camp itself, as it tends to be. Yeah. Not making any suggestions, but there you go. Do we have any other business? Oh, quick note on the cooling vests. Not a hit. This was the first ever heat hazard race, as the FIA declared it, because it was over 31 degrees, off the back of Qatar 2023, which was total nonsense. Drivers vomiting in helmets, needing care from ambulances as they got out of their cars. It was brutally hot. Most drivers not a fan. I can't see this becoming mandatory from next season, given the amount of pushback from the drivers after this race.
I think that they would have used it had it not been the threat of the half a kilo, 500 grams ballast. I think that the moment that started entering the equation, I think that they all turned their noses up and went, you know what, I'm not taking that 500 grams. It's not worth it. Other drivers were worried about it leaking or whatnot, but I think that was probably the issue, more than the actual vest itself. I think they would have been open to it. I mean, they wear the cool vests, don't they, in all sorts of races when they're doing the drivers' parade and the anthems and stuff like that. I just think that they would probably wear it, but they didn't want that extra weight on the car.
Ballast. Well, also, most of the drivers said it only stayed cold for about 15 minutes. And then there is also the possibility that it could actually end up making them even hotter, because it's an extra layer within the car. And it's very uncomfortable. If you've ever sat in an F1 car, it is extremely claustrophobic at the best of times. So to add in another layer, not particularly friendly.
Yeah, it was a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, aircon for an open cockpit? I don't know. Yeah. Anyway. Right, so that is up.
I don't think there was anything else. Was there anything else? I mean, it was kind of a dreary race, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's why we're called Inside the Prana Club, because there's not a lot of track action. We just talk about the stuff around it.
Well, I'm glad we've got a sprint race there next year.
Oh my goodness, I know, can you believe it? Well, we've still got 3 sprint races to go and 6 races. There is still a lot of this season to go. Next race will be the US Grand Prix from Austin, Texas, a firm favourite between the fans and the drivers and the rest of the travelling circus. We do love Austin. But until then, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please do rate and review us. It really does mean a lot. You can also contact us at our Instagram page at Inside the Piranha Club. If you can't spell piranha, just Google it. But until then, thanks very much for listening. We'll be back with our preview of the US Grand Prix.
Thanks very much.